Steelers Nation, come on in. The history of the Pittsburgh Steelers has always been written in moments of pressure, when the weight of the jersey speaks louder and the character of the team is put to the test. And today, reality has changed in a very real way. The league made its decision, and from this moment on, there's no way to talk about the present of the Steelers without facing this head-on. The 2-game suspension of DK Metcalf is not noise, it's not a small detail, and it's definitely not outside drama. It is now part of the path of this season. We're entering the most critical stretch of the year, the point where every decision matters, every absence is felt on the field, and every game separates those who are just participating from those who are truly competing. The Steelers worked hard to put themselves in a playoff position, and now the question isn't about the obstacle, but about the response. These are the moments that define identity, the locker room, and legacy. Smash the like button, because that strengthens the channel a lot and helps this news reach even more Lions fans. And if possible, drop a Go Lions in the comments. Metcalf's suspension puts the Steelers in an immediate bind, and there's really no sugarcoating it. This was a completely avoidable situation. Making physical contact with a fan is something that simply cannot happen, regardless of what is said or how heated the moment becomes. The suspension itself is not surprising, and in many ways, it is deserved. What makes it more frustrating is that it arrives at a time when every snap, every drive, and every game matters. The Steelers are no longer in a position where they can afford self-inflicted wounds, and this one stings because it removes a key offensive piece for 2 crucial games. At the same time, this development has opened the door to something interesting behind the scenes. With Metcalf unavailable, the Steelers have been quietly linked to a potential veteran wide receiver addition, a move that would not be flashy but could be extremely practical. The name connected to Pittsburgh is Lazard, a receiver who has extensive experience playing with Aaron Rodgers, first in Green Bay and later with the New York Jets. Lazard was recently let go by the Jets at his own request, and that timing matters. This is not about chasing a superstar or making a headline move. This is about stabilizing an offense that suddenly finds itself shorthanded at a critical moment. When you look at what the Steelers have already done on offense, the logic becomes clearer. This unit has benefited from adding veteran receivers who understand the system, understand professional preparation, and can contribute without needing months to acclimate. Adam Thielen and Marquez Valdes-Scantling have already shown that bringing in experienced players can pay dividends. Lazard fits that same mold. He would not need to be force-fed targets. He would not need to be the focal point of the offense. He would simply need to do his job, win situational snaps, and help move the chains while Metcalf serves his suspension. Lazard's track record with Rodgers speaks for itself. From 2019 through 2022 in Green Bay, he caught 168 passes for 2,229 yards and scored 20 touchdowns. Those numbers matter because they show consistency and trust in high-leverage moments. Even last season with the Jets, in a crowded pecking order, Lazard caught 37 passes and scored 6 touchdowns. That kind of production, especially the touchdowns, would immediately put him among the more productive receivers on the Steelers roster this season. He is not a long-term solution, and he does not need to be. He would be a short-term answer to a short-term problem, and sometimes those are the smartest moves a front office can make. All of this circles back to Metcalf, because his suspension has forced the Steelers to confront a bigger issue that cannot be ignored. This is not an isolated incident in his career. Even before arriving in Pittsburgh, Metcalf had a reputation for playing on the edge, sometimes crossing it. Since entering the league in 2019, he has accumulated a significant number of personal fouls, including multiple ejections. This is part of why he was ultimately moved on from his previous team. The Steelers knew this history when they acquired him, and now they are dealing with the downside of that gamble. The details of the incident itself only add to the frustration. Initial reports suggested the fan involved used racial slurs and made deeply personal comments, but available audio and video do not appear to support those claims. The fan, identified as Ryan Kennedy, has denied using any racial or hate-based language and has issued a statement through his attorney categorically denying those allegations. According to reporting, Metcalf had previously reported the same fan to security in prior seasons when playing in Detroit, which raises legitimate questions about stadium security and why this situation was allowed to escalate at all. There's blame to go around, but none of it excuses Metcalf's decision to make contact. From a team perspective, the bigger concern is what this says about the Steelers' ongoing struggle at the wide receiver position. The franchise has seen this cycle before, immense talent paired with emotional volatility, followed by consequences that hurt the team at the worst possible times. George Pickens is no longer in the building. Antonio Brown, despite years of elite play, ultimately became unmanageable. Other names from the past tell similar stories. The hope was that this locker room, as currently constructed, could absorb Metcalf's personality without it becoming a problem. This incident tests that belief. What makes this moment especially significant is where the Steelers were just weeks ago compared to where they are now. On November 23rd, the outlook was bleak. The team had just a 17% chance of making the playoffs, a 12% chance of winning the division or securing a top 4 seed, and only a 5% chance of even landing a wild card spot. Fans were openly talking about firing the coach and questioning the entire direction of the franchise. The sky felt like it was falling. Fast forward to now, and the picture could not be more different. The Steelers sit atop the AFC North, control their own destiny, and have seen their playoff odds jump into the low to mid 90% range. A massive 29-24 win over the Detroit Lions and a Ravens loss to the Patriots swung the division firmly in Pittsburgh's favor. The team is playing physical football, leaning on a strong running game, and showing the kind of toughness that defines Steelers football. This is why the Metcalf suspension hurts so much. It arrives when everything is finally coming together. The question now is not whether the Steelers can survive without Metcalf for 2 games, because they likely can. The real question is what this moment represents for the franchise moving forward, both in how it handles the wide receiver position and how it balances talent with discipline when the stakes are highest. Do you see this as a temporary setback that the Steelers will easily overcome, or as another warning sign about a familiar pattern at wide receiver that the team still hasn't fully solved? What cannot get lost in all of this is how the Steelers have responded when adversity hits, because this season has quietly become a case study in organizational patience and internal belief. The Metcalf suspension is loud, emotional, and frustrating, but it is not defining this football team. What defines this team is how it climbed out of a position that most of the league had already written off. That context matters now more than ever, because it frames how the front office, the coaching staff, and the locker room are likely viewing this moment. When the odds were stacked against them back in late November, the Steelers did not panic. There were no rash decisions, no public infighting, no dramatic philosophical shift. The coaching staff stayed the course, the front office resisted the noise, and the players kept working. That steady approach is exactly why this team now controls its own destiny in the AFC North. The division lead is not an accident. It is the result of consistency, resilience, and an identity that has started to show itself more clearly with each passing week. Look at how this team won against Detroit. That game was not about flashy numbers or overwhelming talent advantages. It was about physical football, situational execution, and a running game that imposed its will when it mattered most. Jaylen Warren's impact cannot be overstated, especially now with Metcalf unavailable. The ability to lean on the ground game is not just a luxury, it is a necessity, and the Steelers have shown they are capable of doing exactly that. This is the kind of football that travels well into January, when conditions get tougher and mistakes become magnified. The presence of a real quarterback has also changed everything. For the first time in a while, the Steelers are not simply trying to survive games. They are managing them. They are closing them. They are making timely throws when defenses overcommit to stopping the run. That balance is why the loss of one receiver, even one as physically gifted as Metcalf, does not have to derail the season. It forces adjustments, yes, but it does not force a complete reinvention of the offense. This is where a potential move like adding Lazard becomes so intriguing. It is not about chasing upside. It is about protecting the floor. Lazard understands Rodgers, understands spacing, understands situational football, and understands what is required in pressure moments. That kind of familiarity can shorten the learning curve dramatically, especially in a condensed window where every rep matters. Even if Lazard only contributes a handful of key catches, that may be enough to bridge the gap until Metcalf returns. There is also a larger lesson here for the fan base, and it is one that has been hard-earned over the course of this season. Reactionary thinking feels justified when emotions are high, but it rarely aligns with long-term success. The same voice is calling for sweeping changes when the team's playoff odds were at 5% are now watching a division leader that has nearly locked up a postseason spot. That swing did not happen because the Steelers abandoned their principles. It happened because they trusted them. That does not mean criticism is off limits, especially when it comes to discipline and accountability. Metcalf's suspension should serve as a reminder that talent alone is never enough, particularly in Pittsburgh. This franchise has always valued professionalism, composure, and team-first behavior. When those standards slip, consequences follow, regardless of the name on the jersey or the size of the contract. How Metcalf responds when he returns will matter just as much as how the team handles his absence now. The remaining games against Cleveland and Baltimore will define seeding, momentum, and tone heading into the playoffs. These are not just divisional matchups, they are statements about who the Steelers are and how seriously they should be taken. Winning without Metcalf would send a powerful message about depth, toughness, and adaptability. Even splitting those games while maintaining control of the division would reinforce the idea that this team is built to withstand turbulence. At the end of the day, this moment is less about one suspension and more about a franchise that has quietly re-established its footing. The Steelers are no longer chasing relevance. They are defending position. They are playing meaningful football in December with January very much in sight. That is something that felt almost impossible just weeks ago, and it deserves to be recognized as such. What also deserves attention in this entire situation is how moments like this shape a team's identity heading into the postseason. Playoff football has a way of exposing weaknesses, but it also amplifies strengths, and right now the Steelers are being forced to lean into who they really are. This is not a finesse team that lives and dies by one receiver or one matchup advantage. This is a team that wins by stacking small edges, controlling tempo, and forcing opponents to play uncomfortable football for 60 minutes. The absence of DK Metcalf, as frustrating as it is, may actually accelerate that identity. It places more responsibility on execution, discipline, and collective effort rather than individual explosiveness. Younger receivers are going to be tested. Role players are going to be asked to do a little more. Coaches are going to have to be sharper with game plans and in-game adjustments. These are not negatives when framed correctly. These are the kinds of stressors that either fracture a team or harden it, and everything we've seen from this Steelers group lately suggests they are trending toward the latter. There is also an accountability element that cannot be overlooked. Inside the locker room, players know when something is self-inflicted. They know when adversity is unavoidable and when it is brought on by a lack of discipline. How that is handled internally often tells you more about a team's future than any box score ever could. If this situation reinforces standards rather than eroding trust, the Steelers may actually come out of this more aligned than before. That matters when the margin for error disappears in January. From a broader organizational standpoint, this stretch further validates why the Steelers operate the way they do. Stability, patience, and long-term thinking are not always popular, especially in a league driven by weekly narratives and instant judgment. But those principles are exactly why this team is positioned the way it is now. When things looked bleak, they didn't chase shortcuts. When things improved, they didn't become complacent. They stayed steady, and now they are reaping the benefits. The upcoming games will tell us a lot, not just about playoff seeding, but about belief. Winning in Cleveland, competing with Baltimore, managing pressure while expectations rise. These are the moments that separate teams that simply make the playoffs from teams that can actually do something once they get there. The Steelers have put themselves in position to answer those questions on the field, and that alone says a great deal about how far they've come. So as this chapter continues to unfold, keep your eyes on how this team responds snap by snap, not just to the Metcalf situation, but to the weight of being hunted instead of overlooked. That transition is never easy, but it is necessary for any team with real postseason aspirations. Another layer to this that cannot be ignored is how thin the margin becomes once the postseason starts, and how moments like this suspension can quietly influence the way opponents prepare for Pittsburgh. Without Metcalf on the field, defenses are going to test the Steelers differently. They will crowd the box more aggressively, challenge receivers in man coverage, and dare the offense to sustain long drives without relying on explosive perimeter plays. That chess match is coming, and how the Steelers counter it will tell us a lot about how complete this team really is. This is where coaching becomes just as important as personnel. Play design, sequencing, and situational awareness take on a heightened role. Expect to see more emphasis on timing routes, tighter formations, and calculated play action to keep defenses honest. Expect the Steelers to lean into what they trust rather than forcing what is missing. That is often how teams survive critical absences, not by replacing talent one for one, but by reshaping the way the offense attacks. There's also a mental component for the rest of the roster. When a high-profile player goes down due to suspension, it sends a message, whether spoken or unspoken, about responsibility. Veterans feel it. Young players feel it. Everyone understands that distractions and emotional lapses can cost the entire group. In a season where the Steelers have already climbed out of a statistical graveyard to take control of the AFC North, that awareness can sharpen focus instead of dulling it. What makes this stretch so compelling for Steelers fans is that it feels like a crossroads without being a collapse point. The foundation is strong enough that one mistake does not undo months of progress. The run game is reliable. The defense knows how to close games. The quarterback situation is no longer a weekly question mark. Those pillars matter now, because they allow the team to absorb turbulence without losing direction. At the same time, this situation will inevitably shape how the front office evaluates the wide receiver room moving forward. Talent has never been the issue in Pittsburgh at that position. Consistency, maturity, and availability have been. The Metcalf suspension reopens that conversation, not in a dramatic way, but in a realistic one. When the season ends, regardless of how far it goes, this moment will be part of the internal evaluation process. How much weight it carries will depend on how the team finishes. For now, though, everything is still in front of them. Division control, playoff positioning, momentum, respect. None of that has been taken away. If anything, the next couple of weeks offer the Steelers a chance to prove that they are not defined by one player or one incident, but by the collective strength that carried them from a 5% playoff probability to the top of the AFC North. There's also something important happening beneath the surface with this team that numbers and headlines don't fully capture, and it shows up most clearly in how they close games. Late-game execution has become a defining trait of this Steelers group. When pressure increases, they are not unraveling. They are simplifying, trusting fundamentals, and leaning on each other. That kind of composure is not accidental, and it becomes even more valuable when distractions and adversity creep in from the outside. The Metcalf suspension is one of those moments that tests emotional maturity across the roster. It forces leaders to lead louder without saying more. It forces younger players to understand that opportunities often arrive through circumstances they didn't expect. And it forces the entire team to recommit to the idea that winning football is rarely clean or convenient. The Steelers are learning, in real time, how to manage success without losing discipline, and how to absorb setbacks without losing confidence. From a fan perspective, this is where perspective matters. It is easy to isolate one incident and let it dominate the narrative, but seasons are defined by patterns, not moments. The pattern with this team over the last several weeks has been growth. Growth in identity, growth in execution, growth in belief. The fact that they are being discussed as a team that needs to adjust rather than a team that needs to rebuild says everything about how far they've come since late November. Defensively, this team continues to travel well. That matters now more than ever. Defense does not slump the way offense can. It does not rely on rhythm in the same way. It relies on effort,